Okay, so in this training, we're going to be talking about what it takes to make context engineering approachable. The reason we want to do this is to be able to brief AI to actually get the outcome that we would want. Now, the way we would do this is quite simple, but it requires a few techniques and frameworks to apply so that you can basically brief it in a way that so that it understands exactly what you intended it to do. So why does this workbook exist? Imagine a brilliant stranger has just parachuted into your office. They have read every book ever written. They can code in any language, write in any style, and analyze any dataset you put in front of them. But they have never met you. They don't know your team, your customers, your constraints, your last conversation with your manager, or what the project refers to, and so on and so forth, right? They don't really know what good looks like to you, right? That's what it feels like to talk to these LLMs, these ChatGPT and Claude. Because the core problem is that if you want the AI to give you a particular outcome, you need to provide it the context to do so, right? The AI can't do that for you, and so the responsibility lies within you. But it can be really hard to remember what context you need to give it in order for it to actually understand your intent, right? Because you can have stuff like recency bias, where you only remember the things that have recently happened and not perhaps the ones that have happened over a longer period of time because you just can't remember it. Or maybe just don't know what you don't know, right? So it makes it very easy to then send a vague request, send a vague prompt, and then wonder why the response you get from ChatGPT is unreliable. So hopefully this workbook gives you a lightweight scaffolding, a mental model, and a handful of tactics so that you can stop relying on memory and start briefing AI deliberately. And who's this for? Anyone who uses AI and has noticed that sometimes it nails the answer and sometimes it misses by a mile, and who wants to understand why without getting a computer science degree. So that's the key thing here. You don't need to be a technical person. All you need to do is just adopt some mental models and frameworks, and we'll go over what those are. So first, it's good to clarify what do we mean by context? What does that actually mean? So it is an overloaded word. In this workbook, it just means one thing, which is that it is the information that the AI can see at the moment it generates an answer, right? And this could include many things like the current message you've asked it, everything that you said earlier in the same conversation, everything the AI has said back to you, any files or images or links that you've attached, any instructions from the system prompt or the system, any custom instructions you've set up, or any kind of memory features that you've built in. And now this stuff is usually done by ChatGPT or Claude behind the scenes. Same goes with the tools or integrations, right? So this is all context, right? Information is fed into the model to discern what to spit back out for you. So the way I like to think of it is like a shared whiteboard, right, between you and the AI. Whatever is on the whiteboard at the moment it answers is what shapes the answer, right? So, there's some three uncomfortable truths about the whiteboard, right? So the AI can't see anything that it isn't on the whiteboard. It can't read your mind, right? It can't see your calendar, your Slack, or what you meant, what your intent was. If it's not being explicitly written down, right, where it can actually read it, then the AI is not able to work with it. And everything that is on the whiteboard, right? So if you do get information on the whiteboard, it influences the answer greatly. So you have to be very careful with the quality of information that you put on the whiteboard as well. And thirdly, the AI will rarely ask you, so it will usually take a guess and forge ahead rather than stop and request missing pieces. So if the whiteboard is thin, the answer is filled with assumptions. So assumptions is the worst thing. We want to make sure we clarify assumptions as much as possible. But the problem is that the AI will never be proactive in trying to understand that or clarify those, right? So it comes down to us again. The responsibility is down to us to clear any assumptions, make sure that the information on the whiteboard is quality, and that it's able to see everything it needs to see. So good answers don't come from smarter AI, they come from better whiteboards. This entire workbook is about learning how to curate the whiteboard on purpose. So here are the 5 ways you can get the context wrong, right? And I've kind of labeled them in a nice, hopefully easily rememberable way. But it essentially comes down to a few things. So number 1 is, did you make an early mistake or sorry, did the AI make an early mistake or hallucination early on that got baked into the thread and kind of polluted the conversation? So I call it a rotten seed, right? Did the conversation grow so long that the model is now over focusing on the chat itself and it's not really thinking freshly based on your new requests? So it's basically got like brain fog in a way. And there's also, yeah, like irrelevant stuff being fed into the chat. Perhaps you had some different ideas pop up throughout the conversation. And that's kind of like, again, poisoned the conversation and it's kind of strayed away the model in different directions. And this kind of ties into this one as well, which is having two pieces of information in the conversation which actually disagree with each other. So there are conflicts, and this will really confuse the AI model on what lane to stay on. And yeah, having a thread get too long, right? It will degrade the quality because the context window, which is the amount of information and tokens that the AI model can process within a single chat, is limited. And the more it gets closer to that limit, the more the quality will degrade. So that's something to consider as well. I'm kind of touched upon these. This is an interesting diagram. So you can see here that this is kind of the life cycle of a AI chat conversations, right? So as it gets longer, right, the AI pays attention to the end and also the start, but it kind of like purposefully forgets about what happened in the middle, right? And this is by design to kind of save on or be more efficient. But obviously, if the stuff in the middle is important to you and the conversation, then it's a problem because it won't reference that because of its technical limitations here. So yeah, bigger context windows are not a license to be sloppy. More context is often worse context. And the job becomes being able to curate the right context and not just accumulate over time. So here's a framework you could apply today. If the core problem is that you don't know what to include, you need a scaffold, right? A handful of stable questions that you can run through before you hit send, so that the thinking happens by default instead of by memory. So here's a good sentence to kind of anchor what this framework does, which is that imagine picture this, like if a brilliant stranger were to do this task for me, what would they need to know that they couldn't possibly guess, right? And you can say the same thing about your employee, right? If you give an employee a task, right, what would they need to know to do that task at a good level, to do that task with your intent in mind, right? There's an alignment in intent. This is important, right? And it's the same concept with interacting with these large language models or any kind of AI agent that you have. It's being able to understand, like, okay, what do they need to know that they couldn't possibly guess? Now, obviously, that's quite hard to figure out. So this framework allows you to get that information out of your head and onto the chat, basically. So there's 5 concrete sub-questions that you can ask yourself, right? These are the questions. So I've got a diagram here, and I've got a link to this PDF below. So if you ever want to access it on your own terms and just read through it yourself or share it with your team, that is available for free in the description. So what are the 5 questions? Destination. Where are we going? So what does done look like? You have to be specific about what the outcome is, not just what you want the AI to do, right? So for example, help me with my CV is an activity. But a CV tailored for a senior product manager role at a B2B SaaS company optimized for an ATS is a final outcome that you want it to get to. Number 2 is situation. So what is true right now, right? So think about, the background that AI would need to understand your quest, like who you are, right? What's already happened, what you tried, what's at stake, the kind of stuff that's in your head that you implicitly understand, but that needs to become explicit, right? Number 3 is constraints. So what's off limit? This is basically giving edge cases and kind of guardrails essentially to the AI. So it's often more useful to say what you don't want than what you do, right? Don't pitch me a framework, don't suggest quitting, don't use buzzwords. So it's good to specify, the edge cases, the constraints, so that it keeps staying on the right path and aligned with your intent. Number 4 is audience. So who is this actually for? So number one was a destination, so where are we going? But it's also like, okay, we're going here, but who are we doing it for? Or who is it for? Right? So this is also good context to give. So yeah, a Slack message to your team reads differently from the same message sent to a board, for example. Right? A script for a 5-year-old is a different task from a script for a developer conference, right? So you got to name the audience for the AI. And finally, shape. So, what kind of structure do you want the output to be, right? What's the length? What's the format? What's the tone? This kind of thing is important. So these 5 things can really help get the information from your head and what you want into written paper, into written records, so that the AI can also understand it too. So here's an example of what that could look like if you don't do this framework, or if you don't go through these questions and when you do. So if you don't go through them and you just kind of have a question, you just quickly ask the AI, you might come up with something like, help me write an email to my team about the project delay. Right? If you ask the AI that, or if you even ask the employee that, like, how are they meant to know what's the body of the email exactly? What is the project delay? Which project are we talking about here? Right? So there's a lot of nuance and there's a lot of kind of ambiguity here that's in your head. You understand it, but the other person, the recipient, won't understand it. In this case, the AI won't understand it. Right? And if you go through those 5 questions one by one, so if you ask yourself, okay, where is the destination? Where is it going? Well, it's a short Slack message to my 6-person engineering team. Okay, good. So what's the current situation? Where are we at right now? Well, our Q2 launch is slipping by 2 weeks because of an unexpected dependency on the payments team. Okay, great. What are the constraints? What do we want to make sure we don't do? Right? We don't want to blame the payments team. We don't want to be corporate, and we don't want to promise a new date that we can't keep. Okay, great. Great information. Okay, so who's the audience? Who's this for? Well, it's for our engineers who want straight talk. They don't want corporate comms. And what's the shape? Well, we just want to keep it quite concise, under 120 words, but we want to be conversational. Look how much different that is compared to the initial prompt. And if you give that brief prompt to an AI, I'm very, very certain that the response will be 10 times better than the one on the left. So the brief version isn't longer because the writer is more diligent. It's longer because the writer ran through 5 questions instead of relying on memory. So make the thinking external. That's the key unlock here. So what can you do if things do go sideways, right? So the Brilliant Stranger framework handles the setup, but conversations do evolve and contexts do bloat, and you'll feel the failure modes creeping in, right? Basically, the stuff that we talked about earlier on, about the context pollution, right? So there are some 6 moves that you can pull out when this happens, and each one kind of maps the specific failure from part 2, which we kind of discussed briefly. So, tactic, bring the receipts. What does this mean? So paste or attach the actual source document, ticket, or context. Don't describe it in text, right? Just give the raw information. Start a fresh thread. So if you see yourself switching topics, or you see the AI making a mistake, just start a new conversation, offload the current context into that new one, and start a new thread, right? Revise, don't pile on. So yeah, edit your original message rather than trying to add turn after turn iterations of clarifications. It's just much better to kind of make sure that you just keep the conversation as clean as possible by editing your original message, because it will delete anything that came after it. Keeps context clean, avoids conflicting signals. Yeah. Summarize and reset. So when a useful chat gets long, ask the AI for a tight recap. A lot of the AI agents and coding agents do this, like Claude Code and Codex. They actually summarize the conversation when it gets close to the context windows limit, and then start a new thread with that recap. So yeah, keep notes outside. This is an interesting one. So this is more in line with persistence of memory and AI memory, I guess you could say. So don't use the chat as the memory. Keep any kind of facts and decisions that you want to persist over time and reference into like files, markdown files, documents, your own kind of systems of record that the AI can then pull out time and time again. So you persist the important context that needs to be persisted in something that's a bit more robust instead of a chat, because a chat is ephemeral. It will delete, it will kind of, the chat is a workspace, not a filing cabinet. And, strip the toolkit. So only enable the integrations, tools, or web access the task actually needs, right? So just make it as clean as possible. If this is something that people do with sub-agents. So each sub-agent has a specific vertical, specific task that it does. And with each vertical, with each domain, it only needs certain tools and integrations, doesn't need everything. And this kind of keeps things modular, keeps things a bit more organized, and also prevents kind of confusion from the AI on what to pick in terms of what tools to pick. I kind of touched upon each of these just now. If you want to read this in your own time, again, the link is in the description. You can download it for free. So the pre-send checklist, you can, if you download this PDF, you can tear this page out if you print it, right? Or you can just screenshot it or something. Basically, just a checklist to see that before you interact with an AI, are you going through these questions? Are you going through the Brilliant Stranger framework? Are you then diagnosing it when things go wrong? And etc. So yeah, I've got some practice section here where you can put this theory into practice and get some real life experience, I guess, from this. But I just want to add a bit of a caveat to this. So obviously we've gone from unreliable AI to now reliable AI with better prompting, better mindset, a more advanced mindset to approaching this. But there is still an honest limit to this, which is that it won't save you from the deeper problem, right? The deeper problem, which is an interesting one, is that even at your best, running through the 5 questions, keeping notes outside the chat and starting fresh threads, like you are still the bottleneck. And the reason being is that the context only ever gets onto the whiteboard if you remember to put it there, right? And the older or more obscure the context is, the likely you are to remember it. So this is kind of touching upon the recency bias I was saying. So for example, that meeting 6 months ago where the decision actually got made, or the customer email from last year that explains why a policy is the way it is, the Slack thread from before your colleague joined that holds the missing piece. This stuff is decisions that are crucial within your firm, but they haven't been documented. And if they haven't been documented, if they don't exist, if they just exist in people's heads, then you can't actually brief what you can't remember or what you don't actually have written down. And so this is something that we build at Arpx, which is like an intelligence layer, context layer. So instead of asking you to curate context every time you talk to an AI, we actually capture that in the background for you. We build a system of record. And from the moment the information was first created, 6 months, a year ago, 10 years ago, decade, we capture that information and we track the evolution over time, right? And this is a living memory. As time goes on, as more things happen, as more events happen, it records that and it builds a context/intelligence layer that, your AI can basically ground itself on. So this is the 3 things that will change. Capture happens on autopilot. You stop being the bottleneck, decisions, conversations, any new documents, any edits to documents that are existing, or customer interactions, they're absorbed as they happen. So without anyone having to remember to, gotta log that to the CRM, gotta add this to our knowledge base, it automatically does that for you. And then time becomes part of the context. So most tools only know what you told them today, right? But the intelligence data we build carries the whole history forward. So any conversation from 3 years ago is just as available to the AI as what you said this morning. And thirdly, it surfaces what you would have missed, right? The most valuable context is usually the context you didn't know to ask for, right? And the intelligence layer that we build feeds the AI not just what you remembered, but what's actually critical at that moment, even when you forgot it existed. So yeah, the workbook teaches you to brief AI deliberately, but we make sure that when you do, you're not briefing it from memory alone. You can brief it from everything that's ever mattered completely. Just kind of 10x your productivity in that sense. So yeah, just some closing thoughts then. Everything in this workbook boils down to 3 ideas, right? Context is not free. So every sentence on the shared whiteboard influences the answer. You want to have quality over quantity in this case. But if you have quantity, right? Like say if you have high quality of quantity, you're going to have a really good time, right? And the AI cannot ask for what it needs. So it will guess. Your job is to reduce how much guessing it has to do. And, most importantly, this is more on us as the user of these AI tools, is that we have to make sure to make the thinking external, right? Get the internal knowledge that we have into paper. And this is a skill that will grow over time, I think, as more people use these AI tools. But this is something that we'd have to do. So as AI models get more capable, the ceiling rises for what good context can achieve. But the floor, what happens when context is sloppy, it doesn't move much. So the gap between a casual user and a deliberate one will keep widening. And being the deliberate one is mostly a matter of habit and not talent. So if you start now, if you start building this habit now, you will really reap the rewards in the future once these models get better and better. So yeah, that wraps up the training. like I said, I have this PDF in the description. If you like this content, if you want more ideas on what you want me to discuss or touch upon, then let me know in the comments. But yeah, this wraps this training up. I hope this was useful to you guys. And yeah, if you want to get in touch with us about the intelligence layers and what we build, then there'll be a link in the description where you can book a call with me or just email me, and I'll be happy to discuss. Thank you.